Hi, dear friends. Some words of Torah for Parshat Vayigash. By the time Yosef had settled his family, the years of famine intensified in Egypt. Yosef devised a system that would enable Egyptian society to pull itself out of the famine. He took the grain that he had amassed during the years of plenty and distributed it to each Egyptian family. In exchange, each Egyptian had to forfeit his property to the state. Now that all real estate belonged to Paro, Yosef was in a position to impose a grain tax upon every farmer. The new policy was that for every 5 bushels of grain harvested, 1 bushel had to be returned to the government, and the other 4 bushels could be kept by the individual farmer and his family. In essence, it was a 20% tax on all new agriculture. This system was implemented not only during the years of famine, but for all of perpetuity in Egyptian society. This was a very industrious and wise way of keeping the government strong and its treasury well stocked. But why do you and I need to know this? Why does the Torah dedicate space to Yosef's economic plan for Egyptian society? Furthermore, why the arbitrary tax of 20%? What does that number signify? We suggest that Yosef was planning for the future of his family's long sojourn in Egypt. He knew that in order for his family to spend generations in Egypt, there would need to be changes in the societal structure that would enable his family to spiritually survive the allures and the harmful values that were deeply embedded within Egyptian society. One of the values that Egyptians held dear was that of consumerism. They were very into indulging themselves in all manner of pleasure and luxury. They viewed it as their right to live fatly off the land and exploit the fruits of their efforts to the fullest extent. In 1904, in his essay, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Max Weber published his findings that religion played a significant role in the success of capitalism. Weber argued that the only way for capitalism to succeed was if members of that society acted with self-restraint, based on a religious value that advocated living an austere and modest life. This was what a particular strand of Protestantism, known as Calvinism, emphasized. When Calvinists were successful, instead of spending their hard-earned money on luxury items, they reinvested their money into their businesses. Making money and reinvesting it in order to make more money was the origin of the values and spirit of capitalism. In fact, one of the reasons why we're seeing certain systemic collapses within our Western capitalist system is because capitalism can only succeed when individual consumers behave with a certain degree of restraint and humility. When hedonism becomes the prevailing ethic, when people stop saving and reinvesting their money, and when people wantonly exploit the other, capitalism begins to collapse. Ancient Egypt did not share in that Calvinist work ethic. Yosef realized that the Egyptian hedonistic value system would be detrimental for his family. He wanted to, in some way, detach Egyptians from their sense of entitlement, and therefore took possession of their land. He wanted them to always remember that the land was only on loan to them, and therefore required a perennial tax to be given back to Paro. This reminded everyone that they were not in control of their environment and needed to practice some level of restraint and humility. Yosef believed that this socioeconomic change would help his family come to the same conclusion. We aren't the arbiters of our own destiny. We own nothing in this life, not even our own bodies. Hashem runs the world and owns all the property, as it says, Lashem haaretz umlo'ah. The whole world and its contents are God's. If we look at the verses carefully, we'll note that there was a wisdom in Yosef taking 1/5 of every farmer's grain. Yosef professed that every family was entitled to 4 portions of their yield to correspond to 4 essential needs for grain within every family. Number 1, you need grain to use as seed for planting your fields. Number 2, you need grain to eat and nourish yourself so that you may continue working. Number 3, you need grain for your house. That is, everyone is entitled to a silo of grain to provide a sense of security and to barter for other goods, such as clothing and shelter. And finally, You need grain to feed your children who are too young to fend for themselves. Yosef felt that once the 4 essential needs for grain were met, he could take a remaining portion, the 5th portion, for Paro. I believe that there is a similar message, not only for Egyptian society, but for each of us. Sefer Charedim of the 16th century, quoting Rabbi Ovadia of Bartanura, states that every Jew should spend 1/5 of their income on charity and other mitzvot. That is, after you've spent your hard-earned income on the essentials of living, money that needs to be reinvested in your business, money to buy groceries, money to pay for other essentials such as clothing, rent, and utilities, money to raise your children, then the remaining 1/5 of your income should go to acts of charity, kindness, and other mitzvot. He cites our verse of Yosef taking 1/5 for Paro as an allusion to this, since the word paro is connected to the word in Hebrew piraon, paying a debt back to God for all that he has given to us. That is, despite the often economic drain of living life as an Orthodox Jew, one of the benefits of spending so much money on doing mitzvot is that this in itself reminds us that the money was never ours to begin with. If we are correct, then this would explain an uncanny wordplay that appears in the Yosef story. In last week's Parsha, before Yosef revealed himself to his brothers, he seated them all for a meal after they brought his brother Binyamin down to Egypt with them. The Torah states that he gave each brother a portion of food, drink, and gifts, but that the portion given to Binyamin at the table was 5 times that of the other brothers. Chamesh yadot is what the Torah says. The verbiage is too similar to our Parsha's wording of Paro's 5th portion to be a coincidence. It may be that Yosef was illustrating a lesson to his brothers, using Binyamin, his full brother, as a surrogate for a younger version of himself. What you did to me, he was saying, was an attempt to have it all. You felt that you were the architects of your own destiny, and that you could and would do whatever ruthless act it took in order to succeed in life. You saw me as a threat to your plans, and so eliminated me. You failed to remember that the 5th portion belongs to Hashem, because that's all he asks of us, to remind ourselves that he's in control of everything. Remember the 5th portion, brothers. Remember that it's God's world, so that you won't destroy another person ever again in your ambition to succeed. No doubt it's expensive to live life as an Orthodox Jew. I often wonder if Baalei Tshuva and converts fully appreciate the economic realities of this lifestyle, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Spending one's income on things like Torah education, kosher food, Shabbos and Yom Tov celebration with family, and honoring one's parents and so forth is what makes life worth living. These expenditures also remind us that the income we've been blessed with is Hashem's gift to us, no matter how hard we may have worked for it. He gives us our lives and all we have, so the least we can do is to return the 5th portion to him. May we succeed in living lives with that sense of joy and purpose. Perhaps we can also learn a bit from our Calvinist cousins and try to live modestly as well. And so, dear friends, may our efforts at expending our income for mitzvot bring us ever closer to the redemption. May we see it. Bimhei Rabbi Amenu. Amen. Here's wishing you a beautiful Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.